And to join us for this panel discussion, we are joined by Dr. Elise De Toy, who is from here, the University of Johannesburg. She's a specialist librarian, teaching and learning from the University of Johannesburg. We are also, there we go. Let's give a big round of applause. Please come forward. Please come forward and take your seat. Find a nice chair for yourself. We are also joined by two of our colleagues online, virtually. We are joined by Kingsley Owadara. He's an AI ethicist at the Pan-African Center for AI Ethics. He is also joined with Amao-Taiwo Bukola. He is an entrepreneurship and skills development. He's from the Entrepreneurship and Skills Development Center from the University of Lagos. And he is going to be looking at implementing explainable AI for personal learning in African contexts. In person, we are joined by Dr. Nomalanga Mashishini. She's a senior lecturer in cyber law, and she's also the deputy director for the LLM coursework studies. And where is Dr. Nomalanga? Welcome. Give her a big round of applause. We are also joined by Professor Marumohai, who's a lecturer from the University of Witwatersrand here in South Africa, and he's going to be looking at the role of higher education institutions in ensuring equitable access to artificial intelligence tools for law students. Professor Clement, there we go. Let's give him a big round of applause. And this panel discussion is going to be facilitated by Prof. Maria. Over to you, Prof.
So before we get started, just a little note for housekeeping. We are trying to keep on time, and we've been running slightly late. So we are kind of merging this panel with my earlier discussion. So when we get to the Q&A will be open for the panel, and if you have any question you would like to ask me, we can do those all at the same time, which will mean that we will make up a little bit of time, get you all to tea on time, and stick to time as the day goes. Right, what we are going to do now is we're going to ask each of the panelists to do a short presentation, and once everybody's done the presentation, we'll then open up for a conversation. So we start with you, Elise.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Yes. So I'm basically going to talk about AI from a librarian perspective, whereas my esteemed colleagues might focus more on the academic aspects thereof. So when we think of our students, what is the difference between, if they can have an understanding between human interaction with information and AI interaction with information? So if we think of a human, the content or the information is reflective of the individual's personal creativity, critical thinking, in-depth analysis of a topic. Whereas with AI, it generates content based on algorithms, and sometimes it's a synthesis of either a transformation of existing data. So with a human aspect, it's much more personal in that the person is the creator of the content, is also clearly identifiable by an author providing citations in the written work, whereas with AI, it is sometimes very difficult to identify the originality of the work, since it's being basically synthesized or reliant on algorithms. That's why it's very important for an individual when they use AI tools that it's transparent in the way how they use the AI tools. Again, when an author writes a piece of work or written matter, it is absolutely crucial that it's been cited and acknowledged. So when we think of the definition of plagiarism, how can we expand it or redefine it in terms of incorporating AI. So we all know that the definition, the traditional definition of plagiarism is basically using someone else's ideas without acknowledging it. In other words, giving credit where credit is due. So we need to think of how we are going to expand that definition to integrate not only unauthorized acknowledgement or of written work, but also the unauthorized acknowledgement of AI. So we need to clearly rework or think how we are going to rework the ethical framework to incorporate AI. How was the AI tool used? Which portions of the AI-generated content was used by the student? The contribution of the student's own interpretation. In other words, the student's critical analysis of a research topic. What is the balance between the two? So transparency is very crucial when we use AI tools in our own work. In other words, we need to have a clear reflection on what was applied, which tool has been used, how was it applied. So at the bottom line basically is when now with AI is cheating actually becoming cheating. Did the student 100% completely make use of generated AI content? Or did the student maybe use AI as a learning model? In other words, the student used his own research, applied the research in practice into an assignment, but then the student got stuck. Did the student then rely on AI just as a guidance, in other words, as a coach or a co-pilot to guide the student maybe to better or improved maybe a framework? Or did the student ask the AI technology or the tool to expand or broaden the student's knowledge on a specific topic? So there's a clear now distinction between how are you going to apply the AI technology. So AI technology can't replace what we are doing or how we are teaching our students to think critically and to take responsibility of their own work. AI can be used as a tool, and that's why we have to think how we are going to incorporate AI literacy into the students' curriculum. That's very, very important, that students understand how to use it responsibly, not only rely on AI as 100%, but how they are going to have a balance between the AI tool and their own work. So we have to have clear guidelines in terms of policies and procedures, how students are going to use AI. And that is where the librarians' role comes in, because we are proficient in information literacy. So we can use information literacy to teach students how to use AI in terms of how to evaluate and judge and critique information before you apply it into your written work. Thank you so much.
Right, then we're going to hand over to our two colleagues that are online, Dr. Odowara and Dr. Bukola, and give over to you for about 5 minutes to give your reflections on the topic, and then we will move over to our colleagues back here in the virtual and then open up for questions.
Good morning, everyone. I trust we're all well, and I have been enjoying the conversation so far. I'll be talking briefly on implementing explainable AI for personalized learning in African context. And so far so good. We all have been advocating for the use of artificial intelligence in various sectors. And recently, it's heavily on education, especially with the advent of LLMs and generative AI. And students going to diverting into LLMs to get answers, to get questions done, to get research done, and so much ethical issues coming out of such as plagiarism. We also see universities, diverting to using AI, into delivering lectures, assignments, and other stuff just to make studies easier for students, for learners. But there are less emphasis on the explainability of the model. As much as we encourage Africa to because of several benefits that artificial intelligence presents. But this morning, I just want to talk about how the importance of explainable AI. And you see, explainable AI leverages on what has been called FATE, that is fairness, accountability, transparency, and ethics. In learning, seeing how we, irrespective of the form of AI that is being used, irrespective of how AI is being embedded into education, seeing how we imbibe explainability, understanding how results are arrived to, and making it easy for learners to understand. Because we see that education is a very, very important thing, especially where there's a mistake, hallucination in the algorithms, where a mark or a result is being given to another, or there is some form of recommendation for the wrong learner. So it's good that we begin to look at how fair, while you are building this system, how fair is the system. And I mean fairness, I mean what are the methods that schools, learning centers are using to check bias? What are the metrics of this bias evaluation? We also look at how transparent this algorithm is. We also look at how transparent is, how fair this algorithm recommends. Because also we also look at how the data that are generated, because most countries in Africa now, almost all countries are having their data protection regulations, and they regulate how personal data are being used. So we're looking at this personal data that have been generated to this algorithm. Are this algorithm a localized algorithms, or are they imported algorithms? And what are the systems, what are the mechanisms that are put in place to ensure that this data are secure, are saved, and are well processed? So these are many more what we looking at, talk about in this session. Thank you.
Super, thank you so much. And now I'm going to hand over to the two colleagues here in the physical space again, Nomahlanka and Prof. Clement.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My surname is Marumo Ahai, and my colleague is Mashinini. I feel like we are gate-crashing the conference, because we are coming from a different world, which is law. And when the different presenters were presenting, I was trying to craft legal arguments as to why I disagree with what they are saying. And I had to reprimand myself quite often. So, no, this is not the kind of conference. Right? But nonetheless, I think the debate and the topic are quite important. And it doesn't really matter which faculty you come from. There have been various developments in the legal fraternity where we see a lot of technology being introduced in our courts, and we see a lot of technology being introduced in the way in which we try to perfect the art of teaching law. And I think our paper is more about how do we see this evolution when we are preparing for future lawyers. And I will just give to my colleague to just elaborate as to what our paper is all about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the topic of our discussion is the role of higher education institutions in ensuring equitable access to artificial intelligence tools for law students. And you may be wondering, why are we specifically zooming in on law students? I mean, all students are equal and should be treated equally. But one of the key things about law students is, unlike many other students, our laboratory is really centered around information systems and libraries. right? Which is why we're here, to talk about the library access issue as well. Because what we use is normally the books, computers to access High Online, LexisNexis, etc. But really, when we produce law graduates, some of them become academics, others lawyers, others venture into different streams. But really, the output that they're going to work on is in written form usually, whether they go to court practice or stay in academia or do any other thing, whether they consult or not. The output is usually in written form. So the question around access is that access is not really accessible in most contexts, particularly in the South African context. This is a question that hinges on our historical context and things around digital divide and so forth. And so most of the time what higher education institutions do is that they use libraries as the main hub through which they facilitate this kind of access or provide access to law students who cannot afford to buy books that are expensive, to access software material, or to access online search platforms like High Online and LexisNexis and so forth. But the issues around access still remain. I mean, sometimes you have students who have to take about 3 or 4 taxis just to get to a library like this one here at UJ and access material. They can't afford the books because law books are usually also very expensive. So sometimes even when you're dealing with e-books that they can remotely access, then you're dealing with internet connectivity issues. Or sometimes library e-books are not so easy to access, or they have limited access for limited number of users. So access is a big problem for law students, even though our laboratory is really centered around the library. And so this is why we are raising questions that while people get excited about introducing AI tools, such as your large language models and chatbots like ChatGPT into teaching and learning and assessment, are they really thinking about the challenges that come with using these AI tools when it comes to accessibility, right? Because in the law field right now, what we see is there's a love-hate relationship between lawyers and AI tools, such as large language models, where we've seen cases where parties have been lauded for using AI to develop their court documents, where in the other instance, we've also seen counsel, lawyers, who have used ChatGPT to create court documents which actually made up stuff, made up cases, and they found themselves in hot water, having presented such false information. So some of the challenges that come up with this issue on accessibility are not only in accessing the tools themselves, right? But it's about also accessibility of AI literacy, data privacy literacy, academic literacy, that all come together when you think about this AI tools question in teaching, learning, and assessment, right? And questions around, can we actually, in addition to providing access to these tools, can we give some access to proficiency in using AI tools? Because what we model in our classrooms while we teach with AI tools and so forth, we need our students to be able to use these platforms when they leave university. And so all these questions around accessibility and the layers of accessibility really come up. And so one of the proactive things that we're thinking about regarding the role of higher education institutions is to also be careful of subliminal or unconscious discrimination. For instance, higher education policies are now mostly sitting at a surface level, where a lot of them are talking about whether you may or may not use AI tools, but they don't specify which AI tools are actually key for use. And also they don't really specify issues around distinguishing between AI use for teaching versus AI use for assessment. Because the moment you use AI tools for assessment, you are imposing its use on the students because they need to participate in the assessment to get marks and therefore get credits if they pass. Whereas if you are just using it as a teaching tool in class, some may choose to opt in or not, depending on whether they can actually pay for certain types of access. Because we all know with large language models, the subscription-based access will usually give you access to a better AI tool than a free tool, right? And so this really centers around teacher reflexivity and questions around what can higher education institutions do to address this kind of problem and avoid this subliminal or unconscious unfair discrimination, this distinction between students who are privileged and non-privileged and how they're able or not able to access AI tools. And we propose 3 solutions for now, because we're still drafting this paper. And the first is higher education institutions have to think about ring fencing which AI tools are fair game when you're dealing with teaching and learning, particularly. So this whole blanket approach of saying any AI tool is fine is actually problematic, because you don't know which AI tools firstly exploit your students' data privacy, which AI tools are cheaper to access or free to access but still offer the same kind of computing power. And also, there needs to be some minimal provision of access. Whether higher education institutions start thinking about having LLMs incorporated in their learning management systems to enable minimal access to very powerful and good use AI tools. That's something to actually think about. But also we need to have a larger and more constructive conversation and plans around teaching and talking about what is AI literacy and how we can actually have our students adopt AI literacy. Because I often think it's so funny, we're not done dealing with academic literacy on its own or digital literacy, but we're already at the level of talking about AI literacy, right? And so it seems things are moving so fast, but as South Africa and our historical context relating to equitable access, we still have looming problems. So yeah, thank you.
Fabulous. So while you are thinking of the questions you want to ask, I just want to give a little summary. I think our 3 speakers, well, 3 groups of speakers have given us a lot to think with. Elise has been reminding us of the importance of education and helping students to recognize what AI can do well and where things go wrong. Our colleagues from Lagos are suggesting that actually AI can give a more unbiased answer when, for example, marking. And our colleagues from WITS have been suggesting that AI needs to be looked at with caution, because we can be creating further divides in the digital space. So it's open to you. Any questions to our panel? Please raise your hand so that we can bring the mic to you. And if there are questions online, please let me know and we can read those out.
Oh, thank you very much to the presenter, sorry. Yeah, Ish. So this unlocking this huge world. So I would like also to ask maybe it's David, by the way, we were working with this other library, Marinsky, I think UP. So we had the task to test it. So in all generally comprehending AI, so we are as institutions of higher learning, which is welcoming all people from across the globe. So yeah, the challenge we understood was like, is Americans intelligence, is AI, or Asian intelligence, is AI, African intelligence, is AI, how do you going to decolonize or incorporate AI to feel that also the human rights is also acknowledged and leveled. So the issue, the Chinese AI, it's AI sometimes they comprehend is love. Ni hao or I ni, AI. ANC, the parties, I don't know.
Sorry,
so,
can you just come to the question? Because we've got a lot of people in the room.
With
Thanks.
The translation of indigenous languages. For instance, we had a project to incorporate novels of indigenous languages. So if we translate it in the library spaces also, do we also see it as a tool to further those unrecognized languages in the library? Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll take another 2 questions and then we can answer. Further 2 questions?
Okay. There's one at the back. And who's the third person?
Thank you very much. My name is Njabulo from the City of Johannesburg Public Libraries. We do facilitate. Oh, my questions is going to Dr. Toyd. Yeah, I think you did a presentation about redefining academic integrity. Therefore, I'm one of the person who facilitate information literacy because you touch a bit on information literacy. So I just need to understand, not to understand actually, just a guidance from you, Doc, on how do you think public libraries can use information literacy to promote or to educate the patrons, and what are the possible method or effective method that you think we can employ or we can adopt in teaching artificial intelligence concepts to young learners, because we work with what I can say, learners from primary up until high school. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, I don't see any other hands, so I think over to you, Nomahlanga. Perhaps you want to answer the first question, then we'll get to Elise.
I was sitting here thinking that the first question is actually not for us because it centers around, if I heard properly, which AI tools and what to call them we introduce. But this is exactly what our paper is centering around, to say higher education institutions need to think about scoping, think about extent when we open up higher education to AI tool use, rather. I can't comment on the Chinese stuff, but I think I'll limit my response to that.
Great, thank you. And Elise?
So I also think as librarians and higher education institutions, it's our task also to prepare our students for the world of work. Because as Prof said in her introduction, that the students are going to use AI regardless. And it's our task to teach them how to use it responsibly and to guide them. That in the end, when they go into the world of work, they are prepared to use it ethically and legally. So just to come to your question in terms of the public library. Now you serve different patrons, whereas higher education, we serve higher education students, whereas you have from primary school up to adults, isn't that so? So I think how you can incorporate, remember if you think of information literacy, it is basically for an individual to use information independently. So they are not reliant always on someone else to come to them, to ask them to find the information for them. They need to go out into their world and be able to seek relevant, high quality information on their own. So you can start thinking of, on a primary school level, I would say rather more, rather literacy, maybe more than the information literacy. And as they move on to higher levels of their schooling, to then incorporate the information literacy aspect in terms of evaluating what information they actually need and what is the purpose of the information. Will the information answer their assignment topic? Then you can teach them how to critique or evaluate it. Where does the information come from? Who is responsible for creating the information? Is the information objective? In other words, the tone of the information, distinguish between information that you can trust as opposed to fake news. Use AI, in other words, then to help them. Give them or ask them to bring their assignments, what they are busy with, to the public library. Help them to log onto a computer, onto the AI tool. I'm using just an example, ChatGPT. Ask them to copy and paste the passage from the assignment into ChatGPT. Then you can ask ChatGPT, indicate to me any errors, or how can this lead me to other information? Can you give me a definition of plagiarism? Can you break down plagiarism into constituent parts? Then you can guide the learner. Now go to the computer, look up the definitions provided by ChatGPT, fact check. Does it actually, is it not hallucination? Does it actually exist? So that's how you also force them to think critically and also help them a little bit to doing their own research. I hope that answered your question.
So do we have a question from the online audience?
Yes, we do. And one of the questions that's coming up for us is, does UJ have approved policy on plagiarism that incorporate appropriate use of AI tools?
So the short answer is that we do. The longer answer is that each of the different faculties, because our different disciplines work with AI and their varying different platforms differently, have then more complex ways of dealing with that. And then overall, as an institution, we will probably be putting together a much more comprehensive policy around the varying different forms of AI usage and plagiarism.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Thank you.
Right. So I think that brings us to tea.
Yes.
Tea and coffee is served over there. You'll see the coffee, you'll see some food. Please encourage you to go and have a look at the different vendor stands, which are just outside the doors as you came in. And Brian has an announcement as well.
All right, before we go for tea, let's give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you.